Well, coming up on today's show, Lucid joins with VW for rapid charging in the USA. BMW Group and VW Group are leading the sales of plug-ins in Western Europe in August. And Renault's launching an advanced battery storage program for used EV batteries. Well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're listening in the world. Hello and welcome to the Wednesday, the 26th of September edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transport. Well, thank you to myev.com for helping make this show. They've built the first marketplace specifically for buying and selling electric vehicles, but also researching, learning about those as well. And it really simplifies the process. A great starting place for many as well. I caught up with them today, funnily enough. One of the gang was over here in the UK. If you've heard one of our previous Saturday specials, when the website first launched, and we had Dimitri on the Saturday special telling us a little bit about it. He'd flown into the UK today, so I went and caught up with him as he was in London. So it's nice to see him and also hear all about how myev.com is going in North America. And if you're starting to use that resource, do send me some feedback. And if you have any thoughts, I can always pass it on to the team there. Yes, it's been a long day today. Once again, recording this just before midnight. It's always busy. There's always things going on. And it's my voice is always croaky at the end of the day. I should do one of these first thing in the morning and you can hear it doesn't always sound so tired. Well, it's show 247 of them. This will be show 250 by the end of the week. Every 50 shows, we like to change things up a little bit, add some new features, maybe stop doing what isn't working as well. If you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, the email address to get straight through to me is hello@evnewsdaily.com. Well, we'll start with some news about Lucid, the luxury electric car maker Lucid. They're planning to offer their customers high-speed charging across the United States on a charging network funded by Volkswagen. The Electrify America network was announced yesterday, on Tuesday, that Lucid will be using them as part of a deal. It's a subsidiary of VW, and Electrify America was set up in the wake of the dieselgate scandal. And Lucid are going to have a subscription plan so that drivers can use any of the 500 sites operational. 500 sites or chargers? I need to clarify. Operational by the middle of 2019. That's in comparison to Tesla, who currently have 1,344 Supercharger stations around the world, with 11,041 Superchargers at them. Well, they are the first car maker to piggyback onto another car maker's network, as it were. Over the years, many people have suggested that somebody should jump on board with Tesla's supercharging network, but so far nobody's wanted to. Tesla have been open to the idea. Elon Musk himself, over the years, has said that he would welcome somebody working with a partner. Obviously, it would cost them to access it, but I suspect that many of the big car makers would it would be like admitting defeat to this young upstart company, been going 10 years, and all of a sudden it's proven they can't build their own network. So that's why they haven't done it. I'm surprised some of the maybe smaller someone like, I'm trying to think now. I can't think of any. So someone maybe it's like Workhorse or someone. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not surprised that Lucid has jumped in to get some ultra-fast charging. They are on track to start production in 2020. A $1 billion injection from the Saudi Public Investment Fund was the most recent news for Lucid. And of course, those chargers Electrify America are putting in do go up to 350 kilowatt charge speeds. Well, here in Western Europe, some interesting sales numbers for August on plug-in cars coming from Matthias Schmidt, or Matthias Schmidt. On Twitter, he is auto_Schmidt, SCHMIDT, auto_Schmidt. If you want to follow him, by the way, he knows everything about everything to do with how many cars sold where, by whom, who bought them, and what colour pants they were wearing at the time. He is a fountain of knowledge. He says BMW Group sold the most popular plug-in passenger cars in Western Europe during the first 8 months of the year. It's according to the AID newsletter. And of course, that's the place to go if you want some of that inside industry knowledge. You can also check out schmidtmatthias.de for the research. Accounting for 7% of their total sales in the region is BMW Group. VW Group just behind them with 43,000 sales of plug-in cars. And he does point out that the BMW Group is BMW i plus Mini, and VW Group is all of the VW brands. Now, VW Group sold just under 15,000 pure electric cars, with the remainder made up of plug-ins. And it's interesting that VW comes second only to BMW, and you think, well, BMW Group have got a pretty coherent strategy with their BMW iCars. The i3 is a fantastic little car. They've got a roadmap to the future that is almost upon us, whereas VW Group, you think, well, they're kind of playing around with it so far. There's the e-Golf and the e-Up, and then you've got some plug-in Audis with things like the e-Trons and a few more plugins, of course, across the VW Group, but lacking what would be any kind of real coherent forward direction at the moment for VW, and they're in second place, pretty much tied with BMW Group. So you wait until, I mentioned earlier on Twitter, you wait until they turn on the tap and the numbers are going to be insane off the charts, because anything VW Group do, they do it with massive scale. Well, let's move down this list then. Well, Nissan were in third, and of course Nissan only sell pure battery electric vehicles if we're talking about things with a plug. So that'll either be the Nissan Leaf or the NV200. Hyundai came next, and it was about 50-50 for them, half pure BEVs and half plug-in hybrids. Then it was Renault, of course, with their ZE cars, so with the Zoe and is it the Kangoo van? I'm not good with Renault commercial vehicles. Is that still on sale? Somebody will know. Daimler is next, then Volvo, Tesla, Mitsubishi, Peugeot, Citroen, then Jaguar Land Rover and Toyota. Of course, we are talking here not about hybrids, but plug-in hybrids, which is why Toyota is so far down the list, because, as we know, they choose not to plug in. They do not like the plug at Toyota, which is somewhat in contradiction to where I see the market going, but who am I to argue with Toyota, because they're one of the world's biggest car makers, so I'm sure they know what they're doing. Well, let's move on to Renault, and Group Renault, or Renault, as I've been told, some people like to say it, is announcing the launch of its advanced battery storage program. It aims to build the biggest energy stationary storage system using EV batteries ever designed in Europe. It's going to be 70 megawatts of power with 60 megawatt hours of stored storage. This system, installed on several sites in France and Germany, is going to facilitate the integration of renewables into the grid. Advanced battery storage is part of Renault's strategy to develop a smart electric ecosystem in favour of the energy transition. Well, the purpose of the system is to manage the difference between electricity consumption and production at any given time to increase the proportion of renewable sources on the grid. It means that maintaining the balance between the offer and the demand on the grid by integrating those different sources with fluctuating production capacities, if, when the wind blows and the sun shines, means you can do that. The slightest gap, of course, between consumption and production means that the frequency of the grid veers either above or below 50 hertz, where it has to be stable so that all your things in your house work. Well, they say that our stationary storage solution aims to offset these differences. It delivers its reserves to a point of imbalance in the grid at a given time to reduce the effects. That's Nicholas Schotti, the director of Renault New Business Energies program. He says by helping to maintain the balance of the grid, the stationary storage system is going to boost the economic attractiveness of low-carbon energies. Now, the storage system is built using EV batteries in containers. It uses partly second-life batteries and new batteries for future use in standard replacement during after-sales operations. They go on to say, or Nicholas goes on to say, and I quote, "This unique assembly will give advanced battery storage the capacity to generate or absorb instantaneously 70 megawatts of power. The high power combined with high capacity of our solution will allow to react efficiently to major grid solicitations." We've seen this happening down under as well, haven't we, in Australia with the big Tesla batteries as well, which are already starting to pay themselves back big time as well, and prevent those blackouts and deliver power when it needs to be delivered in microseconds. Well, what do you know about blockchain? I know a little bit about blockchain. I kind of get the theory of it, but my wife said, what's blockchain all about? And I started to describe it to her, and she quickly knew, because we've been together 20 odd years, she quickly knew that I was trying to make it up as I went along. So investigating blockchain is one of the things I'll do when I get a spare 5 minutes, because I don't quite understand it. Distributed energy solutions like solar PV, and batteries and smart controls are getting cheaper by the day and are soon going to outperform traditional energy sources like coal and gas and nuclear, says Hervé Touati. In any case, he says, blockchain-type solutions are going to be needed for the mass deployment of EVs. Now, this story is coming to us via Euractiv.com, who did the interview with him. He says, you need software that does some kind of optimization, and it's where blockchain comes in with your EV. So what this does, it keeps a record of power. It keeps a record. So if you generate some energy from renewables, then that energy can be marked using the blockchain, as far as I understand it, as being from renewable sources. And that data travels with it somehow to the point of consumption. So you know that you're using energy created with renewable power, and the same comes with electric cars. So with EVs and the blockchain, he says you can decentralize to the level of a car the economic analysis and optimization so you use the grid better. In other words, don't charge your car at 6 o'clock when everybody gets home and turns the oven on to cook their dinner. He says, I used to work for a think tank called the Rocky Mountain Institute and made an analysis of EVs in California. And he said that the calculations showed that if you charge your car smart and you charge them at the right time of day, you can optimize the grid. In other words, when there's spare capacity on the grid and they're turning power stations off that otherwise in some places still get paid for power, which they're not generating, as a consequence, if you can use that power and you just flatten out of the curve, the demand curve, it actually lowers the kilowatt hour cost, the megawatt hour cost, for everybody. It makes the whole grid cheaper if you can constantly use it, rather than just designing the grid for its peak 2 hours and then have all this time of the day overnight when it's just underutilized because they have to build for the peak. Well, it's the beauty of EVs, he says, and blockchain. It puts electricity into the grid and it lowers the bill for customers and it requires flexibility. I'm going to put a link to this Euractiv article in the show notes. You can read it for yourself, and if you understand it, can you tell me what it means, please? Right. California is going to hold a hearing this week about the possibility of offering $4,500 of subsidy for every pure electric car sold in the state. That goes up from $2,500, even as customers from Tesla and GM face the loss of the big federal tax credit. Says John Lippert for Bloomberg, the state's able to consider an increase in its EV subsidies partly because revenue is becoming available as companies buy more credits to comply with the state's low-carbon fuel standard, said Dan Sperling, a University of California Davis transportation professor who's a member of the Air Resources Board. So he knows what he's talking about. At this week's hearing, they're going to consider boosting the required low-carbon content of its transport fuels to 20% by 2030 from 5% this year. And all of that means that you could, if you're in California, get another $2,000, not as a tax credit, but as a pure subsidy off an EV, which incidentally what it is here in the UK at the moment. Not dollars, but pounds. Obviously, it's £4,500 for buying a new EV. And for our own adventures in buying an EV for my wife at the moment, I'll update you at the end of the podcast what happened today. Well, 2018 is regarded as a starting year of retired EV batteries in China, and the government there not wasting any time on developing standards and solutions, according to the Electric Vehicles Research website. Well, from 2018 this year, all EV batteries, in fact this month, are going to be given a unique ID number, an identifier to track the battery across its entire life cycle. I love this. So right, that's production. You get the ID number given to the battery at production, then you sell it, then you use it, then you scrap it, then there's second use for home storage, for grid storage, maybe 5 or 10 years after that, then it's recycling in 15 to 20 years' time. EV battery manufacturers are going to code their batteries according to a new national standard in China, and all along what they call the value chain. Now, it sounds a bit like a press release, but the value chain, wherever the battery is being used, you can upload and update that battery information into some sort of traceability platform, and they're doing it already from this month. That's enormous news and great news, and a great way, actually, to counter anybody who says EVs just have batteries that last a couple of years and then go into landfill. Well, 2 more stories, and these are both from Nissan. First of all, if you are in the market for a Nissan camper van conversion, Well, that's been on display at the Commercial Vehicle Show in Hanover. Nissan's range of light commercial vehicles that have been converted into camper vans have been showed off, including the NV200, of course, the pure electric van they make. For travellers who truly want to be at one with the environment, they say the NV200 is perfect to be a travelling companion. It's got the new 40 kilowatt hour battery that you find in the new Leaf. It's got the active thermal management, not too hot, not too cold, just right temperature of the battery, and a WLTP cycle of 200 kilometres between charges. Now, Nissan's first displayed the camper van, and we talked about it on the podcast back in May this year at the Madrid Motor Show, and people went wild for it as well. It's an ENV van, a VNV200 van with like awnings and that kind of stuff, and there's a whole catalogue now that they've done in the meantime, so you can now choose your specific needs. So if you want a solar panel on top, so you can charge your appliances, if you want an awning put on the side, all the details. I'll put a link, by the way, to the press release in the Nissan newsroom, which is the same place I found this story, and this is an interesting one that you might want to weigh in on. The Nissan Note e-Power Nismo S goes on sale today in Japan. It offers buyers the country's best-selling car, the Nissan Note, even more power and more sportiness. The model is a high-spec version of the Nissan Note e-Power Nismo, which has been out a year and a half now. Well, the car's Nismo tuning makes kind of an advanced driving sensation, they say, taking full advantage of the power system, the e-Power drive system, which is really popular with customers for its exciting acceleration. It's very quiet, it's innovative, and it's made the Nissan Note, over the last few months and years, the best-selling car in Japan for the first 6 months of the year. It certainly was in 2018, excluding mini vehicles. Now, if you haven't heard of e-Power, this is the contentious part of it. And what do you think of this? Weigh in on the comments on YouTube or email me. Is it an EV because it doesn't have a plug? And I'm starting to, after all this time, I'm starting to have a bit of a black and white kind of binary definition. If it doesn't have a plug, it's not an EV. So even if it's got an engine, but it's got a plug, let's call it an EV. An electric vehicle is not something which can't take electricity. So, like the Toyota hybrids, which of course they're pretty clearly saying Toyota aren't going to go down the route of a plug because they've got that massive TV advertising campaign in the UK, which is in my Twitter feed every time I look. Must be spending a fortune on Twitter because every time I load my Twitter app, I get the Nissan advert to say, we choose not to plug in. Fair enough. Thank you for reminding me again. And in Japan, e-Power is the technology where they call it an alternative fueled vehicle, an EV, and there's no plug though. So it's got an engine. So the e-Power technology is an engine which acts as a generator, but it's not a range extender. It's just, that's the setup. So you've got to put gas in the car. That runs the engine, that works as a generator, and so it's got a small battery, and that battery is always being used and topped up at the same time, and then you only ever drive on electric motors. So you get all the sensations of an EV because you're driving on electric, but the battery can only be charged by putting fossils in it. So surely it's not an EV. But Nissan say it is an EV. Weigh in with your thoughts. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is there another option I haven't thought of? In the comments. Now, I did mention, by the way, our little story. So a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that our little old Golf started playing up, and neither of us want it anymore because it's a diesel Golf. She uses it to drive around town, which is mad anyway, because she's a nurse that drives between a couple of locations, and having a diesel for that is mad anyway. We've wanted to get rid of it for ages, but it just keeps going, so we haven't got around to it. And recently, it started to play up a little bit, so we had it fixed, had it serviced, and it's on the road now. It's working, it's fine. But around that time, she said, "You know what? It's fine. I'm going to get an EV as well." So she has decided she wants it to be a Renault Zoe. That's her favourite one, and it should be as well. Built on the Clio platform, perfect for city driving. And I think, as of a couple of days ago, we'd narrowed it down to just a couple that she likes around the country. We're going to make a decision this weekend. Today, a press release came through from Renault, and then listeners to the podcast have forwarded it on to me as well, that Renault just launched a new wave of scrappage. So if you buy a new one, because we're going to buy a used one for about £5,500, if you buy a new one for £12,500 current best deals for the ZE40, which is still a good price, you get £5,000 scrappage if your car is older than 2011 and ours is 2010. So that's then really attractive to us because we get the bigger battery, we get the 40 kilowatt hour battery, and it makes it a much more practical car for long distances as well, even with the slower charging speeds on the AC. The thing is, though, in my mind, the bonus is, whereas before we would have sold the Golf and it would probably have gone on for more years of running on diesel, this is scrappage. So if you don't understand that, legally, if we take up Renault on their scrappage deal, they give us £5,000 for the car, even though it's probably worth just under £5,000. That's the deal. They can't resell it. They have to scrap the car. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, right, one diesel definitely off the road, replaced with my wife driving an EV. Well, that appeals to me. But we've never bought a new car before. Never been that fancy. So it's thrown everything up in the air again, and now we can't decide what to do. But it's like, well, hang on a minute, we can get a big battery on the Renault Zoe, and it's probably going to be replaced, not our car, but the Zoe. There's the Paris Motor Show is very soon. Word is there won't be an announcement there, but then maybe Geneva early next year at the Motor Show, they'll be unveiling either a new one or an updated one. And so you think, oh, okay, I don't mind. I never mind having the thing that is slightly older than the newest thing. Like we always have the iPhone that was out last year, just because you just save money on it and you get just like 95% of the best stuff rather than having the latest, greatest. So big decisions to make. Any advice from you would be gratefully received, as always. And while you're chipping into the show on the comments or the email, why don't you answer this week's question of the week? It's set by the team at myev.com, and they're asking you this. How do you charge at home? What charger have you got? Who installed it? Was it something that came with a new car, or did you arrange it yourself? And if you want to share, but you don't have to, what did it cost you? Did you get any incentives? Let me know. Thank you very much to the 85 patrons at patreon.com/evnewsdaily if you want to check out what that is all about. And there are 246 previous episodes of this show for you to gorge upon, all for free. We love free stuff, don't we? The blog is evnewsdaily.com, and on the socials, just search EV News Daily. I'm at the top of all the search results these days. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow.